So I keep getting this question over the last couple of days. Is 1.8 worth coming back to? Is the division, everything that you wanted it to be? Is it worth coming back if I haven't played in an extremely long time? And a whole bunch of different versions of this question. And overall, people want to know, is the update good? Does it add more to the game than any of the other updates that they've had? And I wanted to talk about my experience with 1.8 and kind of what I think this means for the future of the division. 1.8 is a fantastic update. It is very, very good, and it's much better than I expected. I played 1.8 on the PTS, but it just wasn't the same, and I think a lot of reasons it wasn't the same is because when it's not your character and you know you're not keeping any of the gear, you kind of feel a little bit detached to that gear, and things can kind of feel a lot thinner than they actually are on the live game. And I'm surprised at how rewarding it feels to earn div tech to upgrade your gear. Now, you guys remember I made a video a while back talking about the optimization table when they first showed it, and I wasn't a huge fan because I felt like this would take away that good feeling of getting god roll items to actually drop. If you remember, this game had a huge problem a while ago where most of the gear that you got that was good was all through crafting. None of it was ever, found by looting, and this was a huge problem. And they fixed this to eventually, most of the gear that you'd get that would be good would be dropped off of enemies. And I didn't want that feeling of that god roll piece finally dropping. That feeling is so good. And it's moments like that that allow us to do these hours of grinding to feel like you're getting something out of the amount of time that you spend. And I can honestly say the optimization table is really good because you don't get div tech as fast as you do in the PTS when you can just open unlimited amounts of exotic caches and just get a ton of div tech. It is a slow process getting div tech, and I'm actually surprised. Now, you can jump in the dark zone and start stacking up caches and get it through the dark. I think the dark zone's the quickest way to get div tech. But I was doing like West Side Pier, and I was doing assignments, and we were doing, resistance and skirmish, and you do not get div tech very often, but this is good because you'll always have something to do. That div tech is a currency that is now actually worth something. A huge problem with the division is that the Phoenix credits, the regular credits, all those things kind of became useless over time, right? Because we got so much of it, and there was a limited amount of things that we could use those things on. For example, like crafting materials. Like crafting materials are almost completely useless because of no one really using the blueprints anymore, because the only thing you can really use it for is high-end pieces or weapons that you're trying to get perfect rolls on for certain situations. The new use for div tech actually adds a huge layer to the game that I was not expecting the game to have. Let me just go over by all the things that they've added. Like the resistance mode, I'm seeing a lot of people enjoy resistance. I'm playing it here in this video, and resistance is actually fantastic. I love that there's an infinite amount of waves, and this level of challenge that you get with the PvE and resistance is something I haven't felt in a very long time in the division, not since back in 1.3 days. And I think this is really cool because it's one of those endgame PvE activities that we thought that the legendary missions would be, but the legendary missions and the incursions really don't feel like that anymore. I'm more than happy to go through the incursions and the legendary missions once a week to get my exotic caches, probably more now than ever because of the 4 new exotics and the fact that you get a lot of div tech from the exotic caches. But it felt very pointless to play the legendary missions more than once a week, and the legendary missions, for some reason, they're just not very fun compared to resistance. Like resistance, there's enemies coming from all directions, and it mixes up the types of enemies that you play against. You'll be shooting cleaners one round, and you'll have certain modifiers in each round, and it switches it up, whereas in, the legendary missions, you can sit there for 20, sometimes even 30 minutes just killing the same waves of enemies over and over and over, and it just can get really, really boring. And I think that this new level of difficulty when it comes to PvE is actually making me want to put together PvE builds specifically for resistance. Like I now want to gather builds, and I want to, first thing I'm going to work on is a striker build, and I want to make sure I have damage to elites. I want to make sure I have as much armor pen as possible, and it gives you a reason to actually care about those PvE stats that you probably otherwise didn't really need. The PvE stats, especially when you're considering with the legendary missions, you're doing them once a week, right? So is it really worth putting an entire build together to make the legendary missions a little bit easier? Probably not, but with a mode like Resistance, it feels like it's worth, getting a bunch of people together so that we can put together these PvE builds to help us get to those really high rounds. And the fact that it's infinite is great, and I just think it's so cool that there's 3 different maps of Resistance too. It's not like you're doing the same horde mode in the same spot. There's 3 maps, and each time you play through it, it feels like a different experience, because there's so many things to do. Like, there's so many different strategies that you can use during Resistance when it comes to, getting certain turrets online, or using a pulse and switching up your skills, or maybe you want to use one of the healing stations, maybe you want to stay in a certain room, or you want to spend your shade tech on loot if you're feeling greedy and you want to try to get some of those exotic drops. And it's a pleasure, right? The Resistance mode is phenomenal. I love it. It's 10 out of 10. It reminds me of zombies in Call of Duty, but like much more complex, because if you know how looter shooters work, right, like they get better over time, and they consistently get updates, and at least from good companies, they'll make sure to always add more and more and more. And the Division overall, after the last 2 years, has had so much content added to it. They basically took all of that content, all the bosses, all the mechanics, all the new things, and just threw it all into Resistance, and it just works so well. And we played the skirmish for a little bit yesterday, and I was a little worried. About the time to kill, because you guys know that stamina got a huge buff this patch. It gives 30 health instead of 15 now per point, which is huge. People are a lot tankier now. And the time to kill for the NPCs shooting you feels a lot more normal, right? Like, you used to always feel squishy no matter what, but the time to kill in PvP actually isn't that bad. I felt like I could put people down if I was hitting them consistently, but I didn't feel like the time to kill was so fast that I was just getting folded over. The only complaint I have about the PvP is please disable incendiary and explosive rounds, or any type of consumables at that matter, in PvP. I think it's just horrible that someone's going to have a damage boost over you just because they decide to pop incendiary rounds every time they respawn. That's one thing that I really dislike about Skirmish, but we only came across a couple people doing that. I don't think that people should be worrying about popping special ammo as soon as they spawn. I think it should be the complete opposite. I think people should like Skirmish for what it is, and just get back into the fight and just use your builds the way that they should be, because I think when you add explosive and incendiary ammo into the equation, it messes with the time to kill, and I don't think it's very good. But that's like my only complaint about this patch. That, and one more suggestion. I wouldn't really call it a complaint. But I heard that the new Dark Zone is actually not that bad. I'm excited to kind of get into that and try it out. I was a little worried about Rogue 2.0, but I'm seeing a lot of people latch on to the new Rogue mechanics and actually quite enjoy it. It's playing way differently than it did in the PTS. So I can't tell you much about the Dark Zone because I haven't jumped into the Dark Zone yet myself. The Dark Zone's always been kind of like an endgame area for me, and I feel like I have a lot to do outside of the Dark Zone before we move on and start playing that. But the open world, the West Side Pier, is so cool because I found myself running around for hours yesterday, just going from assignment to assignment, killing open world roaming NPCs, getting loot, deconstructing that loot, getting div tech, doing these assignments for div tech, and these cool little side missions that will pop up that will make you use maybe your pistol or try to get, sniper headshots or melee kills. It's cool because I never thought I would ever use my pistol in the Division. Using your pistol is something just really useless. But if you have an assignment that's get 10 pistol headshots, shots or 15 pistol kills, you're going to want to actually take your pistol out and do that. And it was cool watching me struggle with my golden rhino earlier today just to get those 15 kills. I was kind of laughing. I was just sitting here by myself playing and enjoying it. And I found myself playing actually several hours today off stream, and that's how you know that the patch is good, because realistically it's been since I think 1.2ish since I've played the game off stream. I usually always either do a video or I live stream if I play The Division, because that was the game that I mostly streamed. But I actually found myself feeling the need to get on and grind for things. Like, it's so cool. We're going to have classified sets coming next week with the global event, which I'm really excited for, because that's going to, throw a whole new amount of gear into the arsenal for us to go for. And I want to go for the new exotics. I've only gotten 2 of the new exotics. I've gotten the house and I've gotten the heal like 3 times. But the house that I have, although it's really good for PvE, I still also want to get a house for PvP as well. So the hunt is on, man, and I'm really, really enjoying the patch. And I think the question that a lot of people are asking, is this patch worth coming back to? And I think it is 100% worth coming back to. There's a very little amount of bugs. I think of playing for about 14, 15 hours, I've seen maybe 1 bug the entire time. So it seems like they squashed a lot of those really annoying bugs with skills popping late and whatnot. Some people may have different experiences, but for me personally, the game has not been very buggy at all, and all the new features have been really, really good. Now, here is my one suggestion to the developers out there working on The Division right now. Although this patch is fantastic, I highly suggest trying to use loot in multiple ways to make the same weapons feel like different weapons. And what I mean by that is they brought out 4 new exotics, right? It's great. It's fantastic. I love that they did it, and I love that people are going to be going for those exotics because they're new weapons. However, I think it would have been much more beneficial, because I think although there's a ton of new features in 1.8, I still think the game lacks new loot. And I think that they can give us new loot by just being smart about the way that they distribute the loot. For example, you bring out 4 new exotics, but there's no high-end versions of that gun. Now, most of you guys know something like the FAMAS that started off as just a high-end weapon, then became an exotic weapon. Why is there no high-end version of the FAMAS? I feel like there's a missed opportunity there for them to use the weapons, the new weapon models that they brought into the game, to make a regular version of those with regular camos or whatever it is, where you can customize the camo, and make it so that they don't have that third intrinsic perk, so that it makes the guns feel different. For example, instead of the house, have the MPX and the house. The MPX will be the high-end version of the house, right? You have the house, allow the house to have higher base damage than the MPX, but allow the MPX to be able to roll any 3 talents that they want. This is going to open up a ton of new builds. Same thing with the Alejandro. Give the Alejandro with lower base damage, maybe a little bit lower RPM, and give it a base version of that gun. I think that them adding the exotics into the game are great, but I think this was a missed opportunity for them to add high-end versions of those exotics, so that people that may not want to use the weapon in the way that the exotic has to offer, there's still that other gun for them to hunt for that they may like using. Some people out there might not like staying in cover. They may play super aggro, so for them, the Alejandro is going to be kind of a useless weapon because of that third perk. So I think if there was a high-end version of the Alejandro, it would feel like a ton of new loot. It would definitely cater to the wider audience, and I think that it wouldn't take that much work to make that happen, considering the gun model, the shooting, the sound, all that stuff can be exactly the same. Just give us one that's an exotic and give us one that's not. I would love to see a high-end version of the FAMAS. I think that would be really cool to see what kind of builds people go with that. And I think that that would give us more stuff to work for, and I feel like it's something that wouldn't be super hard to do. So like imagine instead of having 4 new exotics, we had 4 new exotics and 4 new high ends. You know, say we got a high end FAMAS, a high end version of the Heal and the Devil, which I'm not sure what that would even be, but then it would be like, you know, an MPX, and then whatever the Alejandra is. I'm not even sure what type of weapon. I forget. I knew it before, but I don't know now. But that's my only little bit of feedback. I think they can recycle the loot a little bit more to give us more items than what we had. Like, for example, when 1.5 came out, I think there was only like 5 or 6 weapons, but instead we ended up getting like, I don't know, like 10 or 12 because there were different versions of the weapons. I think that, you know, doing that will give us more things to hunt for, and it will open up a lot more opportunities for different builds. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you guys are enjoying the 1.8 update, which is free, by the way. And a lot of people are enjoying it, and it's really, really good to see. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Take care, everybody.
I'm just warming up, and they label me a veteran. Rookie of the year, when I started, I was peddling these CDs out my trunk. Speakers louder than an elephant. It's been a long time.